Hello and welcome back to the DayLuna Human Design Podcast with your hosts, Dana and Shayna. I don't know why I always say your name first. Always
I think
say
it's
Dana and
because
Shayna.
I think it's
Like,
because you hear me say it and it's like Dana and Shayna, and then it gets like stuck in your head like it's a jingle.
that's the order of our names is Dana and Shayna. It's not Shayna and Dana. Like, we are not Shayna and Dana. We are Dana
When
and
I
Shayna.
hear someone say Jared and Dana and they say my husband's name first, it makes me so angry. I'm like, wow, you put the male in front of me. So
That's so
I
funny.
guess in a
I'm always
certain way,
second with for Brian
what?
and Shayna. We're not Shayna and Brian. Ooh, that rubs me the wrong way.
What?
So,
I think this is my Leo coming out. I'm like, I must be first in the pairing, but
well,
somehow it worked in this
it's a good
expression.
thing that you're my wife and you get to go first in our name relationship. That was a huge side tangent. It has nothing to do with any topic that we would ever have on this podcast, which today's topic is really cool, really surprising, really um initiating. It's coming from a man gen. We have on a special guest today, Julie Ryan, and we talk about health, we talk about death. She is a psychic medium, but she's also created a bunch of medical devices. She's classic Mangen, undefined G center, just really reading you for filth kind of vibes. And I'm here for it. I feel expanded from this conversation and also like, okay, I want to know more. I want to know more. I want to know more. So I feel like you're going to feel the same way. I love this convo. And yeah, how do you feel,
Yeah, so
Dana?
I agree. I mean, I feel like the conversation around death and around like transitioning, we talk a lot about past lives and your angels and your loved ones on the other side, and kind of like the more spiritual meaning of death. And we also talk about healing and using your intuition to connect to spirit to help you heal in your living life. But like this realm of past lives and death is one of my most fascinating topics I love talking about. But I will say that in general, I am less like body person. Like I don't think about health very much. I don't go to the doctor a lot. But this conversation felt super inspiring for me. It felt like, ooh, I want to develop my intuition to be able to access not only information about my past lives and my loved ones on the other side, but also information about my physical body while I'm alive. So it really kind of enlivened a new spark inside of me. And we do kind of journey from both of those different realms in this conversation. So I'm excited for you all to tune in. And just a little bit about Julie Ryan. She is an inventor, an entrepreneur, an author, and she's pioneered surgical devices to and become a renowned psychic and medical intuitive. Her skill is not just an innovation, it extends into unraveling life's most profound mysteries. Julie's expertise has been featured on prestigious platforms, including Next Level Soul, Michael Sanders, Inspire Nation, The Human Upgrade with Dave Asprey, Coast to Coast AM, and many more. Okay, so without further ado, let's welcome on our special guest for the day, Julie Ryan. I am so excited to be on this call with you. Shane and I were reading more about like your bio and your journey, and it's just so fascinating. I can't wait to hear how you kind of come to where you're at. But I'd love to just start off by asking you to introduce yourself to our audience and share a little bit about what it is that you do and share and teach.
Okay. I'm a businesswoman and an inventor of surgical devices sold throughout the world who learned how to do woo woo, and I'm a buffet of psychicness. Well, that's what
I
I
love
do.
it. It's the
Yeah.
perfect encapsulation, but how you got from point A to point B of being a surgical inventor, entrepreneur into psychic, medium, all of the things, I'm just so fascinated to hear because it's a really beautifully wide spread and variety. And for any of our listeners, Julie is a manifesting generator, which from a human design lens tells us that you are the multifaceted queen, that you have range, that you have variety, that you can do it all. So I'm not surprised to hear this wide spectrum of your journey, but I'm really excited to hear the details of how it happened, how it unfolded.
I think that's a really good description of me because I founded 9 companies in 5 industries and in 30 years, and people say, "Well, how did you do that?" And I said, "I don't know." "Well, why were you in different industries?" I said, "I was just interesting." And so I take money from one and, spawn off a new one. And so it was fun. And I am not one of those psychics who's had dead people chasing her since childhood. Or if I did, I didn't know. I didn't know it, let alone what I would have done with that information. But I learned how to be a medical intuitive and psychic medium. And as I mentioned, I was in the medical industry, the hospital supply industry in particular, for more than 30 years. And so I was always interested in healing. And about 30 years ago, a girlfriend gave me a book called Anatomy of the Spirit by Carolyn Mace. And she called herself a medical intuitive. And I thought, well, what the heck is that? I'd never heard that term before. And I read her book and I wanted to know more. This was before the internet, you guys. So I couldn't look her up online or see what else was out there. So I went to a Barnes and Noble bookstore back then because I thought, well, they're more likely to have more stuff of this spiritual stuff than even my local library. And I found a book called Hands of Light by Barbara Brennan. And she's a late NASA physicist who parlayed very complex quantum physics principles for energy healing into understandable English for the non-scientific mind like me. And I read her book and I wanted to know more. So I called her school and I said, "Do you guys have anybody in my area teaching this stuff?" And they said, "Yeah, as luck would have it, we have a graduate that just opened a school in your town." And I said, "Terrific." And so I studied with her for 6 years. And what really brought me in was the healing things because I was inventing surgical devices and involved in selling products throughout my whole career to help people heal. That was always a part of the equation. I was always interested in it. And I thought, oh, well, this is a new way perhaps to help people heal. And I just found it interesting. So I studied with her for 6 years and still talk to her once a month now. All these years later, she's in her mid 80s and is my mentor. And my family and friends back then said, "Well, why are you doing this?" And I said, "I don't know." And they said, "Well, what are you going to do with it?" I said, "Again, I have no clue. It's just really interesting." I was a mom and a wife and, running companies and stuff like that and studying this woo woo stuff. So here we are, fast forward all these years later, and I do it full time. I sold my surgical device manufacturing company several years ago and thought, okay, now what? And then I was led to do this. And it's the most fun thing I've ever done in my whole life. It's just a blast.
Wow. And honestly, that's the goal as a manifesting generator from human design's perspective is to be having fun, like
Yeah.
literally having a blast with the things that you're doing and getting to shift and pivot and
Right.
chase the play and the joy and the um, enthusiasm to make life better and to really feel like you're making an impact that leaves behind you, like, I wanna say, like, sparkles in your wake of just joy,
Yeah.
and so that's incredible. I love that you've really trusted yourself and taken the bold action to be able to create that many companies, first of all, is incredible. Um, I'm curious to know what the first experience was for you channeling somebody from the other side or having a psychic experience. Was that did it, like, surprise you? Was it something that just came out? How was, like, connecting with those gifts in your life?
Well, again, I learned how to do this stuff and I teach
Okay.
people all over the world how to do it from all walks of life. I think there have been people from 14 or 15 countries that have taken my training. From medical providers, surgeons, doctors, professors,
Wow.
whatever, teachers of all ages to housewives and plumbers and, you know, I mean, secretaries and bankers and Broadway stars. And I mean, it's just endless. And it's just people are led to explore their spirituality. And I think it's becoming way more part of our current zeitgeist, where people are more interested in hearing and learning about this spiritual stuff because they know that there's more to the equation than meets the
Yeah.
eye. So, um, the when I first started studying this stuff, again, remember I came to it because I was interested in the medical stuff.
Yeah.
And I was learning to communicate with spirit. And what I've learned over the past 30 years is spirit communicates in numeric code. That's spirit language. And our brains decode spirit language in a way that we learn. So I'm a visual learner. So the information from spirit that came into me early on was visual in nature. So I started seeing when I was focused on somebody's body on the healing side of the equation, I started to see like a blueprint of the body, similar to a blueprint of a home or a building. In our architectural drawing is always a blueprint. And I started to see these lines and different energies in the body. And then it morphed into I'm like a human MRI now. I can see broken bones, torn ligaments, viral infections, bacterial
Oh,
infections, cancer, whatever inside people's bodies, certainly with their permission. I don't go around scanning people because I think that's unethical. But when people call me, and at the same time, what I realized was once we connect with spirit, we can do it all because we can talk to your dead grandma. I can scan your cat. I can scan you. We can do past lives. I can tell how close to death somebody is. We can talk to any spirit, whether they're attached to a body or not, whether you knew them or not is irrelevant because it's our spirit connecting with somebody else's spirit. So it's, of course, being an entrepreneur, I have to do it my own way. And I've always chuckled when I think, well, you got the mediums and you got the psychics and you got the pet psychics and you got the healers. And it's like, why is it segregated? You connect with spirit, you can do it all. And that's what I teach and
wow.
do.
So fascinating. So, yeah, I was wondering when we talk about medical psychic or medical medium, like you can literally scan people and see what's off with that, which I think is so fascinating because I mean, currently my parents are getting older and I'm helping them move through the Western medical system with their doctors and trying to get answers to things before they become huge problems, like really subtle symptoms. And it is so frustrating. I cannot even tell you how frustrating it is to be with these traditional medical system Western doctors that only treat the symptoms and only when the symptoms have become extremely severe. And it just feels like they don't know anything. They don't know anything about our brain. They don't know anything about the way our somatics and our stored trauma is connected to other things that we might be experiencing on a physical level. Like it just feels like the level of awareness is so low that they're like moving through trying to heal people blindly. And for certain things, Western medicine, obviously like surgeries and things like that, it's incredible. I mean, the things that we can do with surgeries, it's truly incredible. So there's definitely a place where Western medicine shines. But mostly overall, I'm just feeling the collective's frustration and my own included in that. In our lack of awareness, our lack of answers, not being able to get to the root of things, not being able to see things until they're 10 years or 15 years down the road on a physical level. So being able to connect with spirit and suddenly have access to awareness and knowing in a way that is almost unlimited is revolutionary. And I feel like it's definitely the way that we're moving as far as a society. From a human design standpoint, we talk a lot about the spiritual evolution of human beings. And
Right.
right now, we're in a huge pivotal moment. We say 2027 is like the big year. So we're approaching there like a speeding horse to the racetrack. Like we're really moving more quickly towards this evolution, but people are going to be more and more open to accessing their connection to spirit, to getting these deeper answers and not needing to have these old, outdated, crusty systems that are just so disconnected from all of the wisdom and resources that we can actually tap into. So I'm really excited that we're having this conversation. And I think a lot of people listening will be really excited to learn from you and read your books. I mean, you've written a few books, and I'm excited for people to learn more. But I just wanted to ask you, how have you come across any skepticism? So I was talking about how the world's so ready. We're moving into this new era where people want to know this kind of stuff. But I'm curious, in your realm, is it challenging to have people open themselves up to the possibility that all of this is true? Or how has that been for you?
Well, first of all, I want to say that the Western medicine and the Eastern medicine and all the different forms of healing are all part of the healing equation. The work that I do, the work that a doctor does, the work that another medical practitioner does, it's all like pieces of the puzzle that fit together to help. And case in point, I had a client this morning and she was told she had fibromyalgia. She was told she had lupus. And she scheduled an appointment with me. And I have 5 graduates that work with me as well that do client appointments because, I only have so many hours in the day. And there were more people that needed help. So 5 of my graduates who are amazing do client consults as well. And this woman was telling me her symptoms. And I get what I call divine downloads as I'm getting ready to get somebody, I call it on my radar. So my spirit connects into their spirit. And it's like I have a big screen TV in my head and I'm hearing, yeah, she doesn't have fibromyalgia. Fibromyalgia always comes from the gut. It's always gut dysbiosis. The gut's messed up. And she said, yeah, they just told me I have lupus. And I'm like, yeah, you don't have lupus. So I get her on my radar. I've got a hologram of her in my mind's eye. I said, you're full of mold. Where's the mold? Do you have a water leak in your home? She lived in Manhattan in an apartment. She said, yeah, as a matter of fact, the apartment above me had a toilet leak and water was pouring through my light fixture in my kitchen. And she said, and my bathroom always smells moldy. I said, you've been exposed to mold probably for a long time. I could see it energetically inside her body. I said, we get that cleared up. We get your gut healthy. All these other symptoms are going to go away. And
Wow.
and the Western medical system is not set up for that, to detect that. So she had a healing from me on the energetic side that will integrate into her body. And I gave her things that were references that will help integrate it into her physical body and things she could talk to her doctors about. So I believe through clients that have healings, we're educating the medical system in something that's not necessarily what they learned in medical school. Another quick example, and then I'll answer your question, Dana. The other thing that came to mind when you were talking about this was my husband had a new knee. He had a knee implant put in, and I had given the surgeon one of my books, and I said, I will be able to see what's going on in the operating room telepathically. And I'm sure he's thinking, yeah, whatever. Well, I know that's why I was in that industry for 30 years because I have a frame of reference of what goes on in the operating room because I spent so many days and hours in there. So he met me post-op and I said, God, you had trouble getting that implant in there. You had to kind of, jiggle it and jerry rig it a little bit to get it in. And he started laughing and he said, you really could see what was going on in there, couldn't you? And I said, yeah, I told you that before you went in for this surgery. And he's like, okay. And then
Wow.
we went back in to see him like a week post-op. He said, can you, because my husband was healing so well. He said, can you just go home with all my patients? And I said, no, thanks. Um, but it's, it's a slow burn. These guys are seeing really what the results are. And when I can describe to them what they're doing in the operating room, real time, when they come out to talk to me, you can't deny that.
Right.
Yeah.
There's no room
Yeah.
for
Yeah,
skepticism
you
there
can't deny that.
if it's accurate.
Well, and I think skepticism is good. I'm
Mhm.
a skeptic. If I hear something and I'm like, I don't know about that, I'm going to check it out. But to answer your question, it's pretty rare that I have somebody that crosses my path now that's a skeptic. At this point, after doing this for about 8 years, people don't come to me and they don't pay for a private session with me unless they buy into it. And furthermore, they don't call into my show or they don't take my trainings. Most of them, I would say 99.9% of them at this point, they're curious enough that they know that this is at least feasible. And every once in a while over the past 30 years, I'll have somebody say, well, I think that that's just, I don't believe that. I don't believe that you can talk to spirit. And it's usually somebody that's very fundamentalist, religion based. And I'll say, okay, we don't have to talk about this. You want to talk about, and they'll usually bring it up to me and then I'll answer them and they'll say, well, I don't know that I believe this. I said, well, that's fine. You want to talk about football, the weather, newest restaurant in town? I don't care, whatever. And, and then they'll say, no, no, I want to talk more about this. And I say, okay. And I'll say, do you pray? And they'll say, of course I pray. They'll be kind of indignant about it. And I'll say, great. To whom are you praying? Jesus, Buddha, Virgin Mary, some saint, whoever. I was like, great. So when you're talking to Jesus, do you ever get answers to your prayers? And they'll say, yeah, all the time. I'll get guidance from Jesus or God. I'll say, great. So when you're talking to Jesus, does that mean you're both sitting on your living room couch and Jesus is sitting next to you having a conversation with you? And they'll say, no. And I'll say, oh, you're talking to Jesus's spirit. And you can just see kind of like the fireworks going off in their heads going, oh, I never thought of it that way. I said, you're talking to Jesus's spirit. You're talking to the Holy Spirit. And that's what's guiding you. So you're already doing it. And it's really interesting how their thought process can change. Einstein said the sign of great intelligence is being able to change. And once we get information and we can change. So it's not very often that I have that. And I don't feel the need to convince anybody. It's like,
Yeah.
you want to talk to me about it? Great. If you don't, we can talk about whatever.
Yeah. Well, and I can imagine that, some of your clients and please fill in any gaps here, but I can just imagine that, them getting a diagnosis from you or insight from you and then trying to bring that to their doctor to get treatment is probably a little bit of a hurdle if maybe you see cancer or you see something that needs direct medical attention. How is that journey for people? Explaining, I can't I think one time I did a gut test through a separate nutritionist that showed that I had a parasite and I could not get my doctor to write me a prescription to get rid of that parasite. And I had to go to 4 different people to finally get the prescription. So I can just imagine that there are hurdles for people as they are trying to get healing. What is that like for you and your clients?
That's why I give a lot of resources. If it's a private client or even if somebody's calling into my show, I'll say, okay, here's a book by the head of psychiatry at Harvard, or here's a study that was done by this doctor. And I give them the tools to help them get what they need from their Western doctors. So my whole MO is I blend spirituality and practicality to help somebody live a life of purpose and joy. And as far as the doctors go, and it's interesting you bring up cancer, Shayna, because there have been many times where I'll see that cancer has metastasized to an organ or a part of the body before it shows up on the CT scans or the MRIs or the PET scans. And I'll say, okay, it's metastasized to your liver. And they'll say, no, it hasn't. I just had a PET scan. I said, okay, well, we're going to do a healing on it anyways, because that's what I'm seeing. And we'll do that. And then they'll go back in for another scan and it will show up sometimes
Wow.
before it shows up on the equipment. And so that happens. Oftentimes somebody will have like a ruptured disc or a broken bone or something like that. That happened with one of our grandsons when he was little, Sam, who's now a senior in high school. And Sam, when he was 4, fell off the swing, said he was messing around with one of his older brothers and probably got pushed off the swing, if truth be told. And so his mom called me and I said, he's got a broken bone, it's above his elbow on his left arm. I'll meet you down at Children's Hospital. And I did. And the doctor came in and my stepdaughter said, "Well, Sam, we believe Sam's arm's broken in this place." And the doctor kind of looked at her like, "Okay." And then they went and did the x-rays, and guess what? Sam's arm was broken right where we said it was broken. So, yeah,
Yeah.
Wow.
it comes in really handy. And the other thing that comes in handy is this is all done remotely. I am never with a client when I'm scanning them or somebody calling into my show. It's always done remotely, and I can get a hold of you even if you're in a galaxy far, far away. Doesn't matter.
Mm, I love
Yeah.
Wow.
that.
Yeah.
And so with teaching other people to be able to access this level of intuition, I mean, clearly from what you've shared before, like it doesn't matter if you or have always been spiritual or not, or anyone can access this level of complete clarity in their insight and intuition.
Yeah, I just finished my online class a couple of weeks ago, and then I'll teach an in-person one in Atlanta in the fall, October 24th through the 26th. We ran out a whole hotel, and it's a blast. And I had somebody in my online class. I had people from 4 or 5 countries from around the world, and one of them was an orthopedic surgeon, and he said, "I've used your inventions for years in my surgeries. I wanna see what you're doing, that goes with
Wow.
it." And so that was fun. And what I find is regardless of what the person's walk of life is, what their career is, or if they're a full-time mom, or if they're retired or whatever, man or woman, they integrate this into their everyday life. Like, Shayna, you got a baby. So, let's say you're out of town and the baby's with a grandparent and the baby's fussy. Well, you can scan the baby from wherever you are and see what's going on. I mean, how convenient is
Yeah, that's
that?
amazing. Oh
Yeah,
my gosh. Talk about peace of mind and also just a whole other level of connection with your child, but also with anyone, right? But as
right,
like a guardian of someone, it's
right.
just a whole other level of connection and intimacy of "I got you." That's incredible. I am curious, do people do like yearly checkups with you like like they would at, a doctor? Because I'm like thinking, okay, I want to go get scanned by you and also, but I feel healthy. And like, is there just like a yearly checkup that people do to be like, hey, am I good?
Not very often. I mean, people, if they have a lot of things that take longer than an hour, I would say most of the people that I talk to them once, unless they take one of my classes and then they're involved. We have practice groups with all the classes because that's when the skills really ramp up. Otherwise, it's like attending a lecture or reading a book, until you do it and get
Yeah.
validation for what you do, it really helps. And the whole annual checkup thing in our Western Medical Society is part of the business model.
Mm,
I mean, people don't need to go for an annual checkup. Go to a checkup when you feel bad, but they're going to run tests on you and stuff. Well, the body takes care of most things on its own. The body has the capacity to heal everything. But, this whole way, you got to go for your annual checkup and they're looking for stuff that's wrong with you and all. I mean, yeah,
mm.
I was just
it's just a model
Yeah.
I
that
was
that parlays the business model.
Yeah.
I was just going to ask you, what do you tell people around anxiety and fear around our health, or even like the blurry line sometimes of, I had a worry come to mind about my health or something like that, and then maybe confusing it with intuition. I mean, I'm sure once someone's gone through more training, they get better at really deciphering what is fear and what is their true intuition. But in general, what do you share with people that are feeling like hypochondriac worry or like just kind of an anxiety around their health or their loved ones' healths?
Well, I think it's worth paying attention to. if you just have a thought, oh, this doesn't feel right. I need to get this checked out. Follow through with that. That makes sense. And then pay attention to how it feels when, let's say, a a healer or a medical professional says, like to this client I worked with this morning, you got lupus and um, you've got autoimmune disease and your body's attacking itself, which is nonsense. The body's only programmed to heal, but they don't know what the cause is. Just just see how that feels. And she said, that just didn't sound right to me when I was diagnosed with those things. I said, a lot of it has to do with the fact that they need to have a name for the symptoms so they can bill the insurance for it. Right?
Yeah.
There's a
Which
billing
is,
code that goes with all of these different categories of symptoms, and they look up online, okay, so and so's got lupus, and this is her height, and this is her weight, and this is what the medication is that she should be given, and this is how much, and here's the prescription. It's all computerized, but
Wow.
they need to have those codes in order to charge for it.
wow.
So when somebody gets a diagnosis, I always tell them, first of all, everything's healable. And sometimes the healing is death. It can be death. We all know people that have suffered horribly and they're just ready to go on to heaven. They're done. Okay, so
Mhm.
their healing is death. And everything can be healed. The body can heal, has tremendous capacity to heal. And just because somebody tells you something in a diagnosis, that's their opinion. It doesn't mean that it's true. It means that's somebody's opinion. If it's something that's dramatic, get a second opinion. And
Mhm.
then what I'm seeing start to happen is that the medical industry and the energetic healing industry and the chiropractic and the whatever is all starting to come together as part of the healing equation, as I think it should be, because everything that I've just mentioned brings a special
Mhm.
nuance, a special skill set to the table. And at the end of the day, it's the patient who's the CEO of their own body. And they are the ones that decide whether this makes sense for me or not.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
think that
We
that's so important to um emphasize because I definitely feel like it's so easy to give your power away when it comes to authority figures, like giving your own authority away because you don't have enough information, or maybe because you have a fear of authority, or maybe because you that's just what you've always thought you had to do, like be a good student energy of, okay, my doctor said this, that I have to do that and I shouldn't question, or this person told me this. And so I'm like, which way do I go? Looking for somebody outside of you to give you those answers instead of like, okay, let me gather all of these different facets. I love how you put that of like each one has its own role to play to then give you support for you to then be that authority in your life and apply the things that you need or that you feel is right for you. Um
or because you don't realize that doctors run within this corporate capitalistic structure where they have to just diagnose you and move you on so that they can write the check for the insurance. Like if you don't know that that's doctors, standard, then you just think like, oh, if they're diagnosing me with this, then it must be true, right? They're
Right.
wearing a white coat, they went to medical school and I didn't. And so if they're saying this thing, it's got to be true. And so I think even just having these conversations around like, you get to question that, you get to do your own research, you get to have a second opinion,
Exactly.
you get to trust your own intuition, and you get to just have the awareness that currently that's how things are working. So questioning it and doing that research for yourself is really important. I'm curious to ask you, can you elaborate more on autoimmune? Because we're in our early 30s and I have about 5 to 10 friends who are my same age that are experiencing some version, very mysterious, unknown autoimmune conditions where they're getting really severe psoriasis all over their skin and nothing they're doing is changing it. or even just other issues that their doctors really know nothing about, but they have received a diagnosis of some type of autoimmune. I'm curious, can you elaborate on what you were saying about that before?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think you bring up a really good point about we can do our own research. And I encourage people to do their own research. PubMed.org is a great place to go. The articles that get published in the big journals are normally paid for by big pharma. And there's lots of articles that don't see the light of day in the journals, and you can reach them on pubmed.org. Number one. Number two, the doctors, I believe, are doing the best that's humanly possible because they have 6 minutes per patient to spend in their current model. And most of them are unhappy with that because it's so stressful, and they came in to help people heal. This is not what they bargained for, but they have bills to pay. A lot of them come out of school and they got $500,000 in student loans they got to pay. So
Yeah.
there's all of that. The autoimmune thing, I've heard more than one doctor at lectures say all autoimmune, I'm using air quotes here for those of you that are listening and not watching, all autoimmune is gut dysbiosis, which means that the gut is not right. And the gut isn't right for a multitude of reasons. Number one, our food supply has a bunch of chemicals and, you know, Roundup in it and stuff like that. Well, Roundup kills bugs, right? So it kills the bugs in the gut biome. Number one. Number two, most of us have been on a lot of antibiotics or other medicines in our lifetimes because that's just what our doctors were trained to do. I I was on antibiotics probably 4 or 5 times a year till I was 40.
Wow.
And when I was in high school, you guys, all my girlfriends and I were all on tetracycline for years, not because we had an acne problem, but to keep us from getting any acne. It
Wow.
was a prophylactic
Yikes.
done in the 70s. So we were all on antibiotics for years, because we wanted our faces to be clear. Well, what did it do? It just totally messed up our gut biome, which is the ecosystem in the gut. So what happens is we get an overabundance of yeast growing in our gut, candida yeast overgrowth. When I get somebody on my radar who has candida overgrowth, and it always goes hand in hand with mold exposure. And by the way, the symptoms are identical to Lyme disease. When
Wow.
somebody comes to me and they've got Lyme, 99% of the time they've had mold exposure and they
Mm.
have leaky gut because the symptoms are the same. Even if they've had a tick bite, they still have mold exposure, and that's the primary cause. So we can look at that kind of a thing. And once somebody gets their gut healthy, then those symptoms go away. Eczema, psoriasis, any kind of skin condition is always originating in the gut. Arthritis originates in the gut.
Wow.
All that inflammation. And again, back to my being in surgery days, arthritis in the joints looks to me, I get these crazy analogies from spirit. And they're to give us a human frame of reference for this energy healing stuff that's happening. But arthritis in the joints looks to me like that white, crunchy corrosion on a battery that's expired.
Mm.
Mhm.
Like in a flashlight that's been in there for 5 years.
Yeah.
It's not working, and you switch out the battery, and you're like, "Wah!" It's ruptured, and there's this white,
Ugh.
crunchy crap on it. And that's what arthritis looks like in surgery when they're scoping a joint. It's what it looks like on the
Oh,
monitors. So, of course,
wow.
that's my frame of reference because 'cause I've seen it real time. And so I'll watch that get cleared out, and I'll watch stem cell energy get put in to help restore the cartilage. Stem cell energy is great. It'll fix any body part we need. It's energetic, and it can regenerate whole organs that show up on subsequent scans, and the docs are going, "What is going on here?" And I've had
Wow.
several of them call me over the years and say, "What are you doing, and how does this stuff work?" And so I explain it to them. So it's really fun. And then that's in conjunction with there's always an emotional component in place before any kind of medical condition arises, 100% of the time. And so we'll address that too. There's an energy block that's formed from an emotional component. Eastern medicine, acupressure, acupuncture, clear the block, get the chi to move, that whole concept, which is ancient. And so as I perceive it, we have our spirit, which is the main part of us, the energy that makes up our spirit. And then our body is inside the spirit. And then it's all encompassed in what I call the energy field membrane, which reminds me of this really thin, stretchy saran wrap, kind of a plastic bag, imagine. And when there's a tear or a hole in that membrane and the person's leaking power because of an energy block that originated as an emotional event, then it always precedes any kind of medical condition. So I'll envision going into that tear or hole. And if it's something from this lifetime, I'll get what the year was. And I would say most of the time, 99% of the time, they'll know. Okay, well, I started first grade and it was horrifying for me. I was scared out of my mind. Can be something benign like that. Can be something dramatic. Doesn't matter what it was, because as soon as we illuminate it, it eradicates, it allows the energy field membrane to heal, allows the body to go back to working on full power, which helps the body regain and maintain health. I believe it's the most important part of a healing, because we can fix body parts all day long, but if you're leaking power, what's the point?
Yes, and that awareness of, like, identifying that and seeing it is what brings that healing?
It does. Yeah, as soon as we illuminate it, if it's past life, we'll get where it was, when it was, what happened, and then we'll correlate it with what's going on in their current life. And there's always a semblance of a script that will repeat throughout multiple lifetimes. Different time, different place, different language, different set of circumstances, same basic script. Like the analogy I use for this is, you think of Hamlet. How many times has Hamlet been performed since Shakespeare wrote it in 1602? Who knows? But you think about, when was it performed? Where? In what language? By whom? Inside, outside? Who was the customer? Who was the director? Different interpretation, different perspective, same script. And that's what we do throughout our lifetimes. We have multiple scripts that we explore and experience throughout our lifetimes. It's fascinating. Past lives are so much fun. They're a
Yeah,
So
blast.
fun.
I was just going to ask you, transitioning from healing while we're alive to thinking about our transition into death, our past lives, kind of like the more I guess spirit realm of things. Even,
Yeah.
you talk about, you've written a book about angels, angelic attendant. I'm curious to ask you, what in your opinion is the most important place to start in our curiosity around those realms, like past life, death, things like that, in order to really enhance our intuition and our self-love and our joy in our present life? Where do people start in that whole realm?
Well, what I perceive is that we're all surrounded by angels and the spirits of deceased loved ones and pets as we're transitioning. And university based research corroborates and validates that, because it shows that 90% of people at the end of their lives see the spirits of deceased loved ones and pets as they're approaching death. And it's either in dreams or visions, and they find them very comforting. So when we think, oh, grandma's hallucinating because she's seeing her mother that's been dead for 50 years and it must be the morphine. No, it's not. Grandma can really see her mother who's been gone all those years. And I love when science catches up with woo-woo, because woo-woo's been
Mhm.
around for forever.
Yeah,
But
way
I love
longer.
when we have, and I've had to run clinical studies for my inventions to be approved by the FDA and the other governing bodies in other countries. It's hard to get those clinical studies done and to get them even approved to be conducted. So I love when I read about these studies that validate all the stuff that I see. So I think that's a place to start, because if we know, okay, we're all surrounded by angels and the spirits of deceased loved ones and pets as we're transitioning, and our loved ones are going to greet us when we get to what I call heaven, to the spirit world. good Catholic girl, 12 years of Catholic schools. So of course I call it heaven. But what I find is that if that's the worst thing that can happen to us, okay, bring it on. Let's enjoy life. Let's make it an adventure. Let's see what it is we're here to explore and experience and create joy in our lives as we're doing
Yeah.
this and not live a life of fear. So I think
Yeah.
that's a really good place to start and to trust that we're being led in the perfect way, in the perfect time, and then on the perfect timeline to broaden our spirituality and our spiritual experiences.
Yeah, beautiful. It's so it's so fascinating to me, and also I think it's something that needs to be talked about more because obviously all of us are going to experience death, but also all of us are experiencing other people pass. Dane and I have both lost our fathers around the same time. And I wish that I had found you then because there were so many questions about his death and his health. They thought he had lung cancer, but he never was a smoker. There was nothing, but it was metastasized everywhere. So they just said lung cancer. And then when he passed, they put on there like he died from smoking, even though literally he never did. And it was right when COVID happened. So I still felt like maybe he passed from COVID. Anyways, there's all these questions. Wish that I had found you then. But Dane and I both have observed how that transition period of someone dying is like a birth. Like it really is just like helping somebody give birth or be born. And it's incredible. And it's also, of course, like there's so much grief surrounding it, but there's also so much love surrounding it. And so I'm curious, you've mentioned something called like in your work called the 12 phases, right? The let me look it up
Stages.
exactly. The 12 phases of transition.
Correct.
And
Yes.
I'm curious if you could talk a bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And we can talk to your dad and see what he died from if you want
Oh
to
my
know.
gosh,
We
I would
can do
love
that
that.
anytime. So the 12 phases of transition are what everybody goes through as they're dying, as they're transitioning from the human experience into pure spirit, into pure energy. And it happens to everybody, regardless of how they die. If they die instantly, like in a case of a homicide or suicide, or if they die over a prolonged period of time, cancer, Alzheimer's, whatever. And it's a glorious component to a heart wrenching situation, what you just described, where you feel like, oh my God, my heart's being pulled out of my chest right now. And here I know that they're surrounded by angels and they're talking about seeing deceased loved ones and pets. And now I know they're not hallucinating. This is really part of the dying equation. And as I mentioned earlier, university based research validates that it brings a new component. And again, we're merging the practical and the spiritual together to help us navigate life. And when we're in the process of losing a loved one, it makes all of us face our own mortality, whether we're cognizant of it or not. At the time, we in our brains going, whoa, I'm going to be there one day. Wonder what's going to happen. What's happening to him? Is he okay? That's the number one question I get from people is, my mom died, 5 weeks ago or whatever. Is she okay? Like, she's in heaven. It's nirvana. Yeah, she's fabulous. Everybody goes to heaven. There was a movie out in the 80s called All Dogs Go to Heaven.
Yeah.
All people go to heaven too. And and the personality of the person stays with the body when somebody dies. So all spirits are pure love. And
Mm.
so what happens in the 12 phases is the spirit exits out through the top of the head and it hangs on to the top of the head. It looks like a speech bubble in a cartoon, where the character's thoughts or what they're saying, where that's encapsulated. And the first spirit to always show up is the maternal spirit. Always, 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 always. So my mom's deceased. If my mom was still alive, it would be my maternal grandmother. If she was still alive, it would be her mother. It's always on the maternal line. always, always, always. And they bring in the other spirits and the angels and all of that. That really surprised me. I thought maybe our guardian angel would be the one that would be running the show when we died, or maybe God had like a, transition department in heaven and he would dispatch a transition angel, the angel of death or something. I don't know. And I think you bring up a really good point, which is there's always a situation where we're thinking, okay, what's going to happen here? And how does it unfold? And again, it can happen instantly or it can take days, weeks, months. So that's phase 1, 2, 3. We go through 12 phases, couple of nuances in those phases. As more and more spirits come in, they look like dots on the horizon. It's like if somebody's in a hospital room, in a hospital bed, those side walls and the back wall will disappear. And it will be this huge crowd of spirits. I call them the Welcome to Heaven Committee. And they're all there. And they're in period dress. So they're from all of the person's lifetimes, which is interesting. And oftentimes we can describe what the people in the front look like. And they'll say, oh, that's Aunt Susie, or that's my grandfather Chuck, or whatever. And we can describe the animals. And I'll say, did your grandmother grow up on a farm? Because there's all these farm animals there. There's cows and horses and chicks and ducks and pigs and cows. And I'll say, yeah, she did. I'll say, okay, those were her pets. They'll be able to name them. So that's fun. And then about phase 6-ish, there are 2 additional angels that show up, and they are on either side of the spirit bubble that again is attached to the top of the head as somebody's transitioning, as somebody's approaching death. And it can be over a long period of time. Sometimes it's even years. And so the first time I saw this was when my mother was dying in 2002, and I'd never been around anybody that was dying. And I thought, well, this is going to be interesting to see what these angels are going to do. I had no clue, but my heart was breaking on one side because my mother was dying. The other side, I was like, oh, this is interesting. What's going to happen next? And so it was that balance that you were talking about a couple minutes ago. And about phase 9, their wings start to move. And this slow rhythmic motion reminded me of a giant owl. You watch a documentary on a giant owl and you can almost feel the drag that those giant wings are creating. And what I noticed was it started to form a vortex. And it was above my mother's head. And I thought, all right, that's probably how her spirit's going to detach from her body. So that's exactly what happened. And when I was writing Angelic Attendants, I was led to just do an internet search on, I did owl wings vortex. What I learned, you guys, was there's this thing called the wingtip vortex. That's an aeronautical engineering phenomenon that occurs with every bird, every bug, every plane, every jet, every kite, and there are these vortices that cause lift. And I thought, oh my word, this is something that's happening in the spirit world that I can see, I can feel, and I can hear. And it's creating this vortex that's helping my mother's spirit exit through her body, from her body. And everybody that most people that have had a near-death experience, or others will say, yeah, I go through a vortex. I go through a tunnel, and it's like I'm spinning. There's spinning that's happening. That's that vortex. And they always go up and to the right. And I thought, what's up with that? Right hand of God. What's up with that? And I was given a talk at a Helping Parents Heal conference for parents who had lost children. And this physicist came up to me after my talk and he said, well, I know why the spirit goes up and to the right. And I said, okay, why? And he said, think about when you screw a lid on a jar. When you're screwing it down, you go clockwise. When you're unscrewing it, you go counterclockwise and bring it up to the right to lift it off. And I said, okay, Bingo. No. Yeah. So it's been really interesting. I believe that there's a prayer that's said at the end of every Roman Catholic funeral. And I've been to many, many of them throughout my lifetime. And it's called In Paradisum. And it talks about how the angels and your loved ones will greet you and lead you into paradise. And I thought, oh my goodness, that's what I saw with my mom. That's exactly what happened. So I researched it when I was writing my book. And I learned that that prayer originated as a 5th century Gregorian chant. So perhaps it took till the 5th century till someone was well educated enough that they could read and write. And certainly the most well educated people were men living in monasteries and synagogues. So I think, okay, there was some monk that wrote that prayer, but everybody's been able to see this since the beginning of time. And maybe it just took till the 5th century till somebody could read and write down a prayer about what happens when somebody dies. I find that fascinating.
Yeah. So fascinating. I'm loving the empowerment around anyone can do this. And in fact, everyone has been doing this for eons,
Right.
historically. And then obviously we shut it down with our conditioning and our, whatever, our minds. But so I'm loving that. I'm also really inspired just by the yeah, I keep getting the word empowerment, like just so much empowerment around your health, empowerment around things that are so scary, like death. And I love how you said healing is death, like death
Sometimes.
is healing.
Mhm.
And that just feels so empowering once again. So I'm grateful to have gotten to learn from you in this call, just in general. Like you've dropped so many little nuggets that I think are going to help a lot of people listening. Um, how do people, like, the first way do they start working with you? Is it like many different options, whether they're like, I have something that I need you to see what's going on in my body, I want to work with you one-on-one like that? Or you mentioned a show that people could call into, and
Mhm.
then also you have trainings, and books. Like, where do people start? And I guess what avenues should they identify? Like there's different avenues to work with you, like I'm assuming based on different needs.
Well, the buffet of psychicness holds true throughout everything for my graduates working with clients and me. So, in an hour call, we can talk to your dead grandma. We can scan you energetically. We can talk about your cat not eating its kitty food. A lot of times they tell me they want little friskies instead of that fancy food that the vets are giving them. It's hilarious, that kind of stuff. We can do a multitude of things in that hour from the buffet of psychicness. It's not just medical or just talking with
Mm.
deceased loved ones. Usually it's a combo platter with that. I do a show every Thursday night at 8 Eastern, 7 Central, and 5 Pacific. I've said that about 650 times because I think we have 600 and close to 650 episodes out where
Wow.
people call in from all over the world. We do a YouTube live stream. So people are putting questions in the chat there and they're coming in and they're on camera. And it's the same thing. They want to talk to a deceased loved one. They want to do a past life thing. They want a medical scan or they want a PET scan or whatever. And it's a blast because I never know who's calling. I never know what their question is going to be, and I never know what spirit's going to say. So it's so much fun. So we do that. And then, yes, multiple books, 7 books, classes. I have online training that self-paced, that has practice groups that are live that go with it. And then my big training is live. Either I'll do it in the spring online, and then I'll do it in person in the fall in Atlanta,
Wow.
and that's a blast too. And that's the big thing that comes through the most is that we're supposed to have fun when we're doing this stuff. It's joyful, it's a high vibe, it's fascinating, it's interesting, you want to know more, and it's joyful when you're doing it and when you're learning with like-minded people. I also give away a free copy of my book. Can we talk about that for a minute?
Yes, please.
Yeah.
That's such a generous gift that you're giving.
Anybody listening as a gift for joining us today, if you want a free copy of Angelic Attendance, What Really Happens as we transition from this life into the next, just go to julieryangift.com, and we'll send you a free digital and audiobook download. And it has illustrations of the 12 phases of transition, all the individual phases and what happens when that goes on. I feel so strongly about this that I think this stuff should be taught in the schools, which is why I give away thousands of these books to anybody that wants them. But it's a special gift for you for listening
Wow.
or watching today.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And well, first of all, the owl wings and the vortex and angel wings opening up a portal. I am stuck on that. I can't wait to go down a Google rabbit hole of my own inquiry after
Yeah.
this call. But a lot of things that you shared today have been really inspiring and really expansive. I'm excited for our community to be able to learn more from you and read your books. That's such a generous offer of you to give out a free copy of Angelic Attendance. I love that. And I think that in general, we talk about this a lot when we think about change and transformation and just like the greater picture. Part of that is understanding our ability to heal and to not feel like we're stuck where we have been, that there is hope, that there are answers, that we do have support. And also, a part of transformation is accepting metaphorical and physical death, letting go of something and, seeing the beauty in that. So I think that this work that you're doing is really important for a lot of reasons, helping people connect with their intuition, connect with spirit, find joy in life, find motivation to know that their body is self-healing, that they can heal, and also to not be afraid of death, both physical and metaphorical, but to see it as part of our celebration of life, the specialness of this journey. So I'm really, really grateful to you. And I think that this conversation has been really inspiring. So thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and your insight and your magnetic sparkle with us all today. I'm really grateful to have had this conversation.
Oh, my honor. Thanks for having me.
Wow, I am so lit up and inspired after talking to Julie, and just I feel like I want to learn more constantly. Um, but that's just for another day, another dawn, another class that I am taking so many classes right now, and I'm here for it. But as always, where you can connect with us on daylunalife.com or on our Instagram at dayluna. And if you want to cozy up with us and connect with us in ceremony every month or learn more about human design, you can in our membership, Your Human Design Besties. And you might have seen that we closed down our physical offerings to make space for a lot of new offerings that are coming through since our Egypt trip. So stay tuned for what those are. We have a lot of transformative, informational, life-changing things in the works. So we will be announcing those soon. And we just want to send you so much love on your path, wherever that is, wrapping you in light, wrapping you in healing, wrapping you in just that love of you've got this, you're doing it. This life is meant to be lived, like Julie was saying, like releasing that fear and choosing to live this life that you're in, this script that you were given in this lifetime. Now's the time. It's yours to claim. And we are so excited to be here in this time with you. Thank you for tuning in with us today. If you like this video, be sure to like and subscribe to follow along and learn more about human design.